Hello, and welcome back to the Empower Her podcast. I had to stop being a good friend to save myself. So, what does this mean and what does this look like? So, I used to be the quote unquote the good friend for everyone, right? I was the first one to message people. I was the one making plans saying, let's hang out. I was always checking in to see how they are. Are they feeling good? If they were sick, if things were happening, if I knew a big event was coming up, checking in. I was always bringing them gifts on birthdays, on Christmas. I was bringing them sweet treats or like little gifts or like little nice things, like just if I was coming over. I was always asking them how they were doing. And this started to feel like performative closeness, which is a term of like basically you're performing to feel close to someone. You're doing these things just to feel close to someone, but is it actually making you closer to the person? And all of this started to feel like a second job, especially since I didn't feel like I was getting it back from people, but we'll get into that. But it felt exhausting. And especially when I was going through tough times in my life, the last 3 years, I have had a lot of challenges with, I've mentioned it before, losing two of my grandparents and, just a lot of health issues I've dealt with. And it's been a very challenging time. I've obviously had a lot of beautiful moments in the last 3 or 4 years. I met my husband, we got married, all the things, like so many beautiful things. But I've also had a lot of challenges, right? Like a lot of negativity. And it was starting to feel like a burden to me, right? And I was in these group chats and they were expecting me to text every day and every hour, remembering everyone's birthdays, texting back immediately, planning the get-together, supporting people through everything. And the reason I was doing this, and obviously through therapy, I realized because I'm a reformed people pleaser, but I was getting praise for this. It was expected of me. And that really made it harder to stop because I kept getting all this praise and people would say, they were so happy that I was supporting them. They were so elated that I was there for them, but it was causing me stress. But I kept doing it because I thought, oh, this is what makes me a good friend, right? And at the end of the day, I had to realize that that's really not what makes me a good friend. And I felt like there was a point where I felt like I was doing it just to be liked and I was so burnt out. And I had to stop and say, okay, are these people actually my friends? Am I close with these people? Are these people the ones that I actually want to spend time with, and spend my energy on? And I got to a point where I was so burned out that when someone would text me, I would be so stressed. I was like, stop texting me, stop asking me to hang out. I physically felt overwhelmed by the idea of hanging out with people. And this is coming from someone who is theoretically extroverted, extremely social. And so when I got to a point where I was like, I can't have another person ask me to hang out, I don't want to go anywhere, I don't want to do anything, I knew that something was wrong. I was feeling super overwhelmed. And I got to a point where I was like, I want to do work and I want to work instead of spend time with my friends. Now, I love work, don't get me wrong. I'm definitely someone who's enjoyed work, who's loved putting their energy into work. But when I got to a point where work was more important than my friendships, I felt like something was off. And I also felt like they weren't showing up for me in the way I was for them. I felt like they weren't understanding me. I felt like they weren't supporting me. And I sort of felt ignored. And some of those signs that I felt ignored or that I was ignoring about myself was really that emotional depletion. I felt just emotionally completely depleted. I felt really resentful. I felt resentful of my friends. I remember I would have plans with friends and I would be working, right? And I would have to cut work short or stop what I was doing so that I could leave on time to see my friend. And in my head, I would be like, damn, I can't believe I have to stop working to see this person. And it wasn't about the person. It was about, I think I was so overwhelmed and so stressed and so burnt out that it felt like a burden to me to go hang out with someone versus I should have been happy, yay, I get to see my friend and take time off, I get to take a break from work and all of that. And I really felt social anxiety too, especially post-pandemic. I think I spent so much time alone during the pandemic. Since I was single, I lived alone. I was, for 2 months, we couldn't really go outside and see people. And so I felt a lot of social anxiety after that. I was so used to being alone. I finally got comfortable with being alone, something I wasn't comfortable with before. And that created a lot of social anxiety for me. I also had executive dysfunction. I had trouble making decisions and standing up for myself and setting boundaries. It was tiring. I just, all in all, just hated being around people. I ignored people, and I really felt burned out and just emotionally tired and depleted. So this basically what happens in the body, right, is nervous system. And something I talk about a lot, right, is that this affected my nervous system. Me trying to be there for everybody affected my nervous system, my energy, my focus. I was tired. I felt like I had a never-ending list of tasks versus like, yay, I get to do these things, right? Like I wasn't thinking, yay, I get to work, yay, I get to spend time with friends. It was like, oh, I have to work, oh, I have to see my friends, oh, I have to make time for them. Oh, like, I haven't seen them in 2 weeks. They're going to get upset with me if I don't text them, right? Like I felt this impending doom constantly of needing to do things versus like, I want to do these things. And it wasn't filling my cup anymore. It wasn't filling my cup. I was feeling extremely drained. And I felt like these social interactions were no longer filling me up and filling my cup up the way that I actually wanted it to. And, the thing is with boundaries is, we talk about this a lot with boundaries, is sometimes it's the hardest to set with those people that you're closest with. So friends, family, right? And I had a really hard time setting those boundaries. And so I had to make a decision. That I was going to stop over functioning in my friendships. And this was a really hard decision. This was something that was extremely difficult for me to do, especially as someone who is a people pleaser, someone who thrives on being liked, oldest child, parentified, needing to have that validation. Like this was really hard for me. I was the mother bear to my friends. I was always doing nice things for them, always checking in. So this was really hard for me. But I just realized that I wasn't getting what I wanted from these friendships, and I wasn't getting what I was giving. And I actually had a long talk with my husband about this because I had two friends who I was very close friends with for like 13 years. And I mentioned this on the podcast, and I did an episode on friendship breakups. And it was a really hard friendship breakup. It was super hard and it was really painful. But I felt like what I was getting from the relationship wasn't what I needed from the relationship anymore. And anyways, he helped me talk through a lot of these things. And he obviously saw these burnout signs before I did. It's always everyone else. We're always the last ones to know. But he helped me talk through this. So what did this look like for me in practice? Once I finally kind of wrapped my head around this, once I finally sort of was like, okay, what am I going to do? And by the way, while I'm sort of talking about friendships here, I think this can relate to work. This can relate to family. This can relate to, romantic relationships as well. But I'm just talking about it from a context of friendships. So what did this look like? So I stopped texting and calling people first. That was pretty much like the first thing I did. I was like, I'm not going to initiate anymore. I'm not going to initiate. And that also meant that I stopped initiating plans. I was like, I'm not going to be initiating plans with you. I'm not going to ask you to hang out. I'm not going to make plans. I stopped bringing them stuff and buying gifts. Yeah, like if I was invited to a birthday or something like that, obviously I brought a gift, right? But like I stopped buying gifts, especially when like my birthday, they didn't give me anything, or Christmas, I stopped doing it for them too. I would make plans further out. So something I've been doing is like, I make plans with people 2-3 weeks, even sometimes a month out for some of my really busy friends, which helps spread things out. I also have like a limit now of how many social plans I do. So my limit is like 2 social plans, like one during the work week. And then on the weekend, I don't mind like 2 social plans, just like not 2 super intense ones. And again, it'll depend like on my energy. I have a lot of energy now, but back then when my energy was really low, I was like maximum 2, like 1 during the week and 1 on the weekend. Like I can't do more than that. I really, really can't. And I started saying no to plans that didn't serve me. So not only would I say no, but if someone said, let's hang out, let's do XYZ, I would say, no, we're not doing that anymore. I have a friend and she loves to make plans like closer to where she lives. And I started saying like, how about we do this instead? And picking a place that's kind of in the middle ground for both of us to get to, because I think that that's fair at the end of the day. And this had a big emotional impact. I was feeling extremely guilty for doing this. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't something that I was able to do from one minute to the next. It was extremely challenging to do. I felt extremely guilty. I had this fear of being judged. There was a lot of grief because I did lose friends in the process, and there was a lot of silence. So when I lost my two best friends who we had a group chat and we texted every day, I remember the first couple of months, I told my husband too, I was like, no one's texting me. No one's calling me. And it felt a little lonely at the beginning. And, I think that's okay because obviously my nervous system needed to reset. I was used to having literally like 100 to 200 messages a day from one group chat. And then, of course, there's everything else to nothing. And it was a really, really big transition. And I really had to grieve my friendship losses. I often think that sometimes those losses are worse than like even a relationship. I mean, we were together. We were friends for 13 years. They saw me, from being a teenager up until an adult, meeting my husband. And it was really sad because we stopped being friends right before my 30th birthday. And they, didn't get to celebrate me through my wedding, through getting married, through getting engaged. And that was really sad because that was something we had always planned on doing together, celebrating together. And it was really sad for me. I really had to grieve that process. And I ultimately felt like, with my other friends who I'm still friends with, that I was being a bad friend by pulling back. And I thought they would hate me. I thought they'd, stop wanting to be my friend. I felt unworthy, to be honest. Like, that's really how I felt. But I learned a lot in the process of this. I obviously learned to set better boundaries. I learned to respect myself. I learned, who my friends are and who aren't. Because people that are no longer in my life now, they weren't meant to be there. And I have a lot of friends who are still in my life and they did step up to the plate or they did make changes or just our friendship dynamic changed. And that's okay too. And the majority of friends, did start to be the ones to initiate. I had one friend who, we got really close and then she got into a relationship and she sort of disappeared. And I felt like I was always reaching out to her. She would make plans with me, then cancel. There was just a lot. So I just said, you know what? I'm not going to text her anymore. I'm not going to ask her to hang out. And we didn't talk for probably we didn't even see each other for 7 or 8 months. And then she ended up breaking up with her partner because it wasn't a good fit, which, I already knew back then, but I let her do her thing. And, we had to talk about it. And I said, I pulled back. She thought I was mad at her. And I said, listen, I just pulled back. I thought that you needed to spend time in your relationship and make that work. And I didn't feel like there was room for our friendship to grow. And she totally understood. And now, since then, she's been active with me. We hang out about once a month. We're loving spending time together. And it wasn't because I was forcing it, but she needed some time, dealt with her relationship, and then came back around. And that's totally fine. Not everyone has to be the best friend you talk to every single day. I think there are different tiers of friends, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. Just there are people who are different types of friends for you. You have your best, closest friends, and you have people that you casually see, then you have acquaintances. There's different tiers of friends, and it's okay to have different tiers of friends. Not everyone can be your ultimate bestie all the time. But even with my bestie, someone that I've been friends with for a really long time, we did have to work on our communication. We were, when we were both single and we had just broken up with our partners back in 2020, we had spent a lot of time together. We chatted every day on the phone, multiple times a day, all the things. And while it was great at the time and I needed it at the time, I got to a point where I no longer needed that anymore. And that's also okay. So our friendship evolved into, we didn't talk every single day. We probably text every other day or whatever. We hang out every week, every other week. And she's my best friend, but it doesn't need to be an all day, every day sort of situation. So you can really change the way that you have your friendships and how you hold your friendships as well. And I started giving less gifts as well and spending less money on people because I just felt like they weren't doing it for me. And what's the point? It's not about tit for tat, but it's I'm just going to give you the energy you're giving me, period. And there's nothing wrong with that. And again, I did lose friends in the process. My friendship dynamics changed. I had to rearrange dynamics in my mind, rephrase dynamics in my mind. But it's better for me in the long term. And then I can make room for people who, do want to be my friend. At the end of the day, I was trying to be a quote unquote good friend as a way to feel valuable, safe, and included. I wanted to be liked, right? Like one of my love languages is acts of service. I love doing nice things for people. But again, if I'm not going to get that energy back, and again, it doesn't need to be 50-50, right? Like we have different seasons of life, but like if I'm not going to get that energy back to some degree, then I need to look at what I'm giving to that person, right? Because at the end of the day, real friendships should include reciprocity, rest, repair, and not be performative. And I felt like a lot of my friendships were performative, and that was a problem. And, we live in a society where the world tells women our worth is how much we give. That's what we're told. How much we give is our worth. And I was really on this journey of trying to reclaim myself and reclaim what it looked like to be a quote unquote good friend or a good person. And I had to realize that I can't look at each friendship that I have the same way. Each one is completely different, and I need to match the energy of the other person. Maybe the other person can't give me more than that, and that's okay, but I'm going to match that energy. And again, not in a bad way. This is simply for my own sanity and so that I can feel good in what I'm doing, right? And something that I learned and something that I think is really important is that you can still be a good friend. You can still be loving and caring and not be available 24/7, right? I don't need to be available all the time. I can still care deeply about my friends, love them, support them, be there for them, and still need space and my own time, right? Like you don't owe someone constant contact to prove your loyalty. I think in my friendship that I had for 13 years, a lot of it came down to them saying, oh, loyalty is important, etc. But to me, loyalty looked different than, sending 5 million texts a day. To me, that's not loyalty necessarily. I think you can be loyal without that. And I think that you can be loyal and, have more distance. And I think that's important as well. At the end of the day, real friends can handle your silence, your growth, and your healing space. And that's what needs to be reflected on, right? Because being a good friend isn't dependent on how much time you spend, how much money you spend. It's about the quality. It's about the quality of the relationship. Are they there for you in the tough times? Are they supportive? Are they kind? Are they empathetic? Like that's what matters at the end of the day. And it's about the quality of your interactions. And so this is just kind of like, I really wanted to do this episode to say it's okay, especially when you're in your 20s and 30s and even more 40s, like relationships change, dynamics change, and it's okay. And it's okay for you to step back. It's okay for you to reset your boundaries. It's okay for you to say, this isn't working for me. And again, I talked about friendships in this episode, but this can be for work. You can say, at work, like, this isn't working for me anymore. I want to set better boundaries. I want to think about my work differently. I want to do different things. That is absolutely okay to do. You just have to look at it and say, if you're burnt out, stressed out, if something's not working for you, if the boundary's not working, how can I reset? How can I reset and recharge? And, at the end of the day, I started out with saying, I felt like I was being a bad friend in order to save myself. But at the end of the day, I don't think I was being a bad friend. I think I was still being a good friend. I just really had to reprioritize in my brain what that really looked like. So I hope that this episode was inspiring, helpful, and kind of just showed you that it's okay to sometimes take a break. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to change, and really just understand how you're feeling, listen to your energy, and listen to how you're feeling, because that's super, super important. If you want to work with a coach and work with someone who's going to support you in all of these areas, setting boundaries, my DMs are always open. You can always chat with me, and please rate and review the podcast and give it 5 stars if you enjoyed this episode. It really, really helps boost the podcast, which I would so appreciate. I hope you all have an amazing day. Sending you all the beautiful, successful, positive, abundant vibes for the whole week, and I'll catch you in the next episode.